What drives a person to commit the ultimate crime? To take another human life? Today we're diving deep into the mind of a killer. We'll explore what fuels their darkest impulses and share real-life cases that have shocked the world. Is it nature or nurture, evil or mental illness? Let's unravel this chilling mystery together. The mind of a killer isn't easy to understand. Psychologists have spent decades trying to piece together the factors that turn an ordinary person into a murderer. At the heart of it lies a disturbing cocktail of psychological, biological, and environmental influences. Psychopathy is one of the most critical psychological traits studied in serial killers. Psychopaths often exhibit a lack of empathy, remorse, and fear, traits that make them particularly dangerous. Dr. Robert Hare, a renowned psychologist, created the Hare Psychopathy checklist, which helps identify these traits. It includes aspects like superficial charm, grandiosity, and pathological lying. Many infamous killers, such as Ted Bundy and John Wayne Gacy, score highly on this scale, revealing how their psychopathic traits enabled them to manipulate and exploit their victims. However, not all murderers fit this mold. Some have suffered severe trauma, leading to violent behavior. Richard Ramirez, the notorious Night Stalker, endured years of physical and emotional abuse in his childhood. His troubled upbringing, compounded by exposure to violence and drug addiction, created a cocktail for a killer. He confessed that his acts of violence were often driven by a desire to assert power and control, showcasing the impact of psychological trauma. Let's explore some chilling real-life cases that provide a glimpse into the minds of killers. Each of these stories highlights different psychological motivations, leaving us to question how far the human mind can fall. Ted Bundy is one of the most notorious serial killers in history. On the surface, Bundy was a good-looking, charming law student, but beneath that facade was a ruthless predator. He confessed to killing over 30 women across several states in the 1970s. Bundy often exploited the trust of his victims, luring them by pretending to be injured or asking for help. His charm made him more relatable, allowing him to blend into society without raising suspicion. Psychologists believe Bundy was a classic psychopath who lacked empathy and used his charm to manipulate his victims. His trial, one of the first televised cases in U.S. history, mesmerized the public, especially due to his bizarre decision to represent himself in court. Bundy's calm demeanor while discussing horrific crimes highlighted the chilling disconnect in his psyche, leaving many to wonder if he ever truly understood the weight of his actions. Aileen Wuornos's story presents a stark contrast to Bundy's. She was a prostitute who claimed she killed 7 men in self-defense, but it's widely believed her killings were motivated by a combination of survival and revenge. Wuornos had a traumatic childhood, filled with abandonment, sexual abuse, and exploitation, which shaped her worldview. Her early experiences created a deep-seated anger toward men whom she viewed as predators. When Wuornos shot her victims, she often framed her actions as self-defense against attempted sexual assaults. Her case raises critical questions about the intersection of trauma and violence, challenging the notion of a typical killer. Jeffrey Dahmer, known as the Milwaukee Cannibal, horrified the world with his gruesome acts of murder, dismemberment, and cannibalism. What drove Dahmer to such extremes? Experts suggest he struggled with feelings of isolation and a desire for control, stemming from his childhood experiences. Despite showing early signs of deviant tendencies, like animal cruelty, Dahmer's crimes went unnoticed for years. He admitted that his killings were driven by a need to create a bond with his victims, often leading to his horrific acts of necrophilia. Dahmer's shocking confessions sent waves of horror throughout America, revealing the complexity of his mental health struggles and the societal failures that allowed his crimes to escalate. While these killers were driven by different motives, their crimes raise important questions. Is there something inherently wrong in the brains of murderers? Researchers have found that many violent criminals exhibit abnormalities in their brains, particularly in areas like the amygdala, the region responsible for emotions like fear and aggression. Scans of killers' brains often show damage or reduced activity in these areas, suggesting a biological component to their behavior. In a groundbreaking study, Dr. Adrian Rain at the University of Pennsylvania examined the brains of murderers and found structural differences in areas associated with self-control and decision-making. This research offers a glimpse into the neural underpinnings of violent behavior, but it's essential to remember that brain abnormalities alone don't turn someone into a killer. It's usually a combination of factors. Childhood abuse, head injuries, and social isolation are all common experiences in the lives of serial killers. For instance, Henry Lee Lucas, who claimed to have killed hundreds of people, had a traumatic upbringing filled with neglect and abuse, coupled with a childhood head injury. All these factors created a foundation for his violent tendencies. One of the most debated topics in criminology is the question of nature versus nurture. Are killers born or made? Some experts argue that certain individuals are genetically predisposed to violence. This idea gained attention with studies on the warrior gene, or the MAOA gene, which has been linked to aggressive behavior. In 2009, neuroscientist James Fallon discovered that he had the brain patterns of a psychopath, but he wasn't a killer. Fallon's case illustrated that while genetics might play a role, environment and upbringing often determine the outcome. On the other hand, many serial killers share backgrounds filled with neglect, trauma, and abuse. Edmund Kemper, known as the co-ed killer, had a horribly abusive mother who belittled and humiliated him throughout his childhood. This led to a complicated relationship with women and eventually drove him to murder. Kemper's case showcases how psychological trauma can fuel violent behavior. Moreover, studies show that children exposed to violence or instability in their homes are more likely to develop aggressive behaviors. The interplay between genetic predisposition and environmental influences creates a complex tapestry of factors that contribute to a killer's development. Not all killers act out of hatred, revenge, or psychopathy. Some kill for the thrill of it. Take the Dnepropetrovsk Maniacs in Ukraine. In 2007, 2 young men went on a killing spree, brutally murdering at least 21 people and filming many of their attacks. When questioned, they admitted they did it for fun, to see how it felt. Their desire for excitement and notoriety drove them to commit horrifying acts of violence, highlighting the darker aspects of human nature. Peter Kürten, known as the Vampire of Dusseldorf, also killed purely for pleasure. He reveled in the fear and pain he caused, later stating that the sight of blood aroused him. Kürten's case illustrates the chilling allure that violence can hold for some individuals, blurring the lines between thrill-seeking and murder. These thrill killers often exhibit a profound detachment from the consequences of their actions, viewing their victims as mere objects in a twisted game. Their stories remind us of the thin line between excitement and depravity. Is there a way to spot someone before they turn into a killer? While not all violent individuals give warning signs, there are red flags that society can look for, especially in children. Research suggests that early signs of violent tendencies often include a fascination with harming animals, setting fires, and chronic lying. These behaviors, if left unchecked, can evolve into something far worse. For example, Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, exhibited these behaviors in his youth. He tortured animals and became obsessed with bondage and control, revealing disturbing fantasies that later translated into. The mind of a killer is complex, often shaped by a combination of psychological, biological, and environmental factors. But can we ever truly understand what drives someone to take a life? The truth is, each killer is different, and while science can explain some aspects, the darkest corners of the human psyche remain a mystery. As we've seen today, the line between ordinary and monstrous can be disturbingly thin. Understanding these motivations can help society identify potential threats and work towards prevention. Stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay safe.